Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder if society is actually becoming more fair and accepting, or if things are going backwards? Well, this fascinating new study dives deep into that exact question. Imagine this: for years, the trend seemed clear. We were getting less biased, more accepting. But this research looked at brand new data from millions of people. And guess what? Those positive trends have actually stalled and in some cases reversed. This study is a big deal because it directly addresses concerns from a lot of people who feel like prejudice is making a comeback. The researchers looked at attitudes towards different groups of people, and the results are surprising, especially when it comes to younger folks who used to be the biggest drivers of positive change. For over a decade, from 2007 to 2020, the story was one of progress. Attitudes toward groups based on sexuality, race, age, disability, body weight were all becoming less biased. Even the automatic subconscious attitudes, the ones we don't consciously think about, were also heading toward neutrality. It really looked like we were on a solid path towards being a more equal society. But even back then, there were tiny hints that this progress might not be a straight line. Around 2016, for a brief period, some of these biases actually went up before going back down. These were often linked to specific events, like a politician making fun of a disabled journalist. But these were temporary bumps, and the overall prediction was that bias would continue to fall. Then came the years 2021 through 2025. The researchers point to a perfect storm of events happening at once. The big challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic, growing economic worries, intense political divisions, and all the negativity that can spread online. They suggest these kinds of big societal upsets can really shape how we feel about different groups of people. So, how did they test this? They looked at data from a massive online project called Project Implicit. Imagine millions of people, about 2.8 million, just in the newer data from 2021 to 2025, and over 9.9 million across the whole study from 2007 to 2025. These people took tests designed to measure their attitudes, both the ones they consciously chose and the ones that came more automatically. They looked at attitudes towards sexuality, race, skin tone, age, disability, body weight, and for the first time in this type of study, transgender identities. The tests are pretty clever. For the automatic attitudes, they used something called the Implicit Association Test, or the IAT. It essentially measures how quickly people associate certain concepts, like thin with good versus fat with good. If you are faster at pairing thin with good, it suggests you have a stronger automatic association, or bias, between thinness and positive qualities. For consciously held beliefs, they just asked people directly on a scale. And here is the big reveal: the optimistic trend from before 2020 has officially stalled or even reversed. All 7 attitudes they studied showed an increase in bias from 2021 to 2025. The biggest jumps happened in attitudes towards sexuality, transgender people, race, and skin tone. For example, they predicted that attitudes towards sexuality should have continued to decrease in bias. But instead, they actually increased. On the automatic measures, bias went up by about 22%, and even more on the conscious measures, where it more than doubled. Similar surprising upticks in bias were seen across the board. This graph really shows the shift. You can see the steady downward trend before 2020. And then after the dashed line, which marks the start of the new data, the lines change direction or flatten out. That is the reversal the researchers are talking about. This table breaks down the numbers. You can see for sexuality, race, and skin tone, the predicted change and the observed change are dramatically different. Instead of going down, bias actually went up for most of these categories. It is a pretty stark reversal of what was expected. Now, don't despair just yet. While the recent trends are concerning when you look at the whole picture from 2007 all the way to 2025, there have still been big decreases in bias overall. So we've made progress over the long haul. But the worry is that progress has slowed or stopped. This table shows the overall journey. For instance, explicit attitudes towards race have seen a huge decrease in bias over the entire period. But then you look at the recent column and you see that shift. One really interesting finding is when this change started. The automatic, unconscious attitudes started changing direction before the conscious ones. It seems like our gut feelings and automatic associations shift first, and then our conscious beliefs catch up, or at least start to shift later. This suggests that unconscious biases might be early warning signs of bigger societal shifts. Who is driving these changes? Well, the researchers found that for most groups, like based on religion, education, or race, the trends were pretty similar. This suggests the changes are happening on a larger societal level rather than just being specific to certain groups. Even international samples showed similar patterns. However, there were two key differences. Politics definitely played a role, with conservatives tending to show larger increases in bias than liberals on many issues. But the most striking difference was age. Remember how younger people used to lead the charge in becoming less biased? Well, in this new data, younger respondents are actually the ones showing the biggest increases in bias. This is a complete flip from the previous trend. For example, on sexuality attitudes, bias more than doubled among young people. This figure visually shows that shift. Look at the young lines on the right. For many attitudes, they really started to trend upwards in bias, especially after the recent data period, while older groups have remained more stable or even slightly decreased. The researchers dug even deeper and looked at the combination of age, politics, and gender. They found that young conservative men, in particular, were the most likely to show increased bias. This specific group seems to be experiencing the biggest reversal. This complex graph shows those interactions. The right side with the bars gives you an idea of the average trend for each specific combination of age, politics, and gender. You can see that generally young and conservative groups, especially men, are on the rise in terms of bias. So, what is causing this reversal? The researchers tried to rule out a few common ideas. They looked at whether anti-gay attitudes might be spilling over from increased anti-transgender attitudes, or if specific controversial rhetoric like sexual grooming narratives was to blame. They didn't find strong evidence for those specific targeted explanations. However, they did find some suggestive links between increased negative sentiment on social media like Twitter and the rise in biases. So, while it is not one single cause, the online environment seems to play a role. Their main explanation is that the turbulent period of 2020 to 2021, with the pandemic, economic stress, political polarization, and online toxicity, created a sense of threat and instability. This can make people more hostile towards outgroups, leading to increased bias. It is like the whole societal climate shifted. And that shift affected how millions of people feel about others. This research really challenges the idea that progress toward less bias is guaranteed. It shows that attitudes can go in reverse, and that societal events have a powerful impact on our individual feelings. It is a wake-up call showing that we can't take progress for granted and that there is still a lot of work to be done. The previous research from this team had found temporary blips in bias around 2016, but those quickly corrected. What is different now is that the current reversals are widespread, affecting almost all attitudes, and they've lasted for 5 years. This suggests something larger than a single event is at play. The finding that younger people are now showing the biggest increases in bias is particularly concerning. The researchers suggest that their heightened existential worries about the future might be finding expression in increased hostility, especially coupled with the influence of certain online communities. It highlights how quickly social norms, for better or worse, can shift, especially among younger generations who are often early adopters. Of course, like all research, this has its limits. They used data from Project Implicit, which is huge but not perfectly representative of everyone in the US. Also, proving direct cause and effect for something as complex as societal trends is very difficult. They suggest future research could try to pinpoint the exact impact of specific events like COVID or political challenges. So, what is the takeaway? For years, we thought we were on a steady path toward a more accepting society. But the data from 2021 to 2025 tells a different, more complicated story. Bias hasn't just stalled, it is increasing in many areas. This isn't a cause for despair, but a call to action. It reminds us that fostering harmony between groups is an ongoing effort, one that is deeply influenced by the world around us. It is crucial to keep tracking these attitudes so we can understand and address them effectively. What do you think about these findings? Does it align with what you've observed in the world around you? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this breakdown helpful, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more explorations into the fascinating world of psychology. Thanks for watching.